So we are going to put together our Mousetrap car from Whitebox Learning. This is the kit, and what we will need today besides the kit, we will need some super glue, some scissors, we'll need string, a pencil, a ruler, we have a pipe cutter, we have a pair of pliers, we have a pair of snips, some masking tape, and then we also have our measurements. You can print these measurements out from Whitebox Learning. I have the students just fill out a piece of paper that have all of the measurements, so that's what I'll be using. Makes it a little bit easier. I'm going to try to do this as quickly as possible because I have videos for each step, but this will give you an overview of the entire process. First thing that I'll do is get my rails. There's 3 in here in case you break one, I guess, but we really only need 2. Take these 2 rails and we're going to tape them together so that I only have to measure everything once, and any holes that I drill for the axles will be perfectly aligned for putting the rest of the car together. So, got that. Now, first measurement I need to make is the length of my chassis, and the length of my chassis is going to be about 250 millimeters. So I'm measuring that from the back of the car. It'll be 25 centimeters. I'll put a little line right there. And then the distance from the rear, that is where the rear axle is going to go. Mine is 1 centimeter. I'm just going to put a little dot there. And then my wheelbase is 225, so I'm going to measure 22.5 centimeters from the other axle, and I'll just put a little dot right in the center. Okay, so you can see here's the distance from the rear. So for my distance to the rear, my wheelbase goes to here, and this is my entire chassis length. And then I need to cut this. So you can use an X-Acto blade to do that, or you can use a knife of some sort. The balsa wood is pretty thin, so just using an X-Acto knife will actually work. Guess I'm going to need to change my blade out. Okay, so I don't need these pieces anymore. Put my X-Acto blade up. Now I need to drill holes in here for the axles. And I have a Dremel that we use as a drill press, so that makes them nice and straight. Very important to hold this straight, tight. Don't let it wobble at all, because you want these holes to be exact so your straw will fit through there. Okay, beautiful. That's all I need to do with the chassis rails. Next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to prep the Mousetrap. That's pretty simple. Now, I want to make sure also that I mark here, this is the rear and this was the front of my Mousetrap car. Get this Mousetrap out. I need to take the spot where the cheese, we don't need that. Take my pliers, and I'm going to take this little trigger mechanism out of here, which we're going to need this. So this little trigger mechanism we're going to need. I'll set that aside. Okay, and then also, I don't need this entire loop for the Mousetrap. I need just this arm to come off so that I can put the lever arm on there, and I'm going to snip it right here. Okay, and then I can take this part off. That's all we need. Okay, so now I've got a Mousetrap that I can put the lever arm on. Set that aside. Okay, I have a solid aluminum piece, and this is going to be for the axle. I'm going to use snips to cut that, not a pipe cutter, which we'll be using later, but I'm going to use snips to cut this. I'll measure out my front axle, which is, in my case, 80 millimeters or 8 centimeters, and make a quick mark. Make a snip, and I've got my front axle. I'm going to go ahead and measure 110 millimeters or 11 centimeters, and I'm going to have my rear axle. My rear axle. Set that aside. I do need to snip this little wiggly spot, I don't know, off of my hook. Okay, so I'm left with a nice straight end. That's going to go on the end of my lever arm. My lever arm is going to be this hollow piece, okay, because it needs to slide over this arm that I have. And I'm going to cut that with the pipe cutter here in a second. And this is going to be 155 millimeters in my case, so 15.5 centimeters. And here's how we do this. I have my mark, and I just need to tighten this up so the blade is right on top of the mark that I just made. I'm going to tighten this enough to be snug, and then you can either spin the tube or the tool around it. Once I've done that once or twice, I'll tighten it a little bit more, and then we'll spin this guy around. Alright, probably one more pass, and we should be good. And you notice it makes a nice clean cut. If you tried to use snips on this, it would just crush the end. So you can see here, if I try to use snips, I'm going to crush it. That's not going to be good for the lever arm. You don't want to do that. Alright, so now I have all of my parts. I am not using a spool, but I will need the washers in a minute. And I'll need to put my wheels on. And I need to put this guy on here. This is the straw that I'm going to use. It's going to go around my axle. Alright, so next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to attach the mousetrap. I'm going to put my mousetrap lever arm on here because I need to know this distance. And you'll notice I have the rear of my vehicle, my mousetrap car is back here, right? What I need to know is the distance. I need this lever arm to line up directly with the axle hole that I drilled. And then my mousetrap is going to be mounted so that that lines up. And I'm going to make a mark here and here where my mousetrap is going to go. Now, this is a common mistake. The lever arm doesn't face this direction. I just use it to measure. I'm going to flip it around when I attach it because the lever needs to come all the way back and wind around the axle in order for it to go. So, we're going to go ahead and attach this right now. In one of my videos we used hot glue. I'm going to use super glue this time. But I'm just going to put a little thin line of super glue right here. Don't need a whole bunch. It really grips well to the wood and to the mousetrap. I want to make sure my mousetrap lines up with the marks that I just made, and I want it to be exactly aligned with the edge of the mousetrap and the side of the rail. I'll glue that on there. It'll take just a second. Nope, didn't quite adhere. Okay. We'll give it another second to dry. And on this, the tighter you are able to squeeze, the better that super glue adheres. And then if you want, you can put a little bit more in the corner just to make it secure. A little bit. There. Okay, now it is super important that the holes that you drilled for your axle are aligned, because otherwise you'll get some binding. Now, even though I marked where it should go, I'm going to do one more step, and I'm going to go ahead and take this straw, I'm going to push it through here. So that I can make sure that is aligned. What I don't want is it to be crooked. If it's crooked, it's really going to mess me up. So I want it to be nice and straight. And I'm going to make sure that these marks that I made are aligned properly. And to me that looks pretty good. So I like it. Alright, I'll go ahead and put some more super glue on here. The other rail. I won't have too much time because obviously the super glue dries fast. Get it lined up. And again, push them down. Okay. That's good. Alright. Don't need this on here right now. I'll go ahead and put the wheels on. This was my front axle, so I can put one of the front wheels on here, and all we got to do is push it on very carefully so you don't break the wheel, but just push that in there. Comes with some washers, put those on. Okay, this little washer goes in there first, and then I'm going to need a piece of the straw. I'm going to come over, cover that, and it won't need to be quite as long as the entire axle, because I still will need to put a wheel on there. So let's make sure if I push the wheel on, I've got a little bit of play in here, which is perfect. Take this, slide it in the front, just like this. If I want to secure it in place, put a little dab of super glue on there. And on here. Okay. Spin it, dries rather quickly. Put my axle through. Need my other washer. Don't forget that one. And then I just need to push this wheel on. Okay. And there we go. I'm actually going to push down on this a little bit so that the straw will adhere to the rail. I'm pretty much done with my front axle. My rear axle is going to be a little bit different. I can't let the straw go all the way through because I'm going to need some room for the string to wind around it. But I do want to have enough on here where it will help reduce the friction. So I'm going to take a small piece. I want to take a piece, I want to make this piece big enough that first of all, I want it to stop right here at the edge. So it goes through the wood, but it doesn't stick out too far. And then just have enough room on this side, or if this is lined up, it'll stop the wheel from wiggling around too much. And I'll go ahead and make a little mark right here for that. Other side, should have just about enough. Okay, so I'm going to do the same things I did. Push this wheel on. I need to... Okay. Alright, I have another washer. We've got really just need to make sure that this pokes through a little bit, and I'm going to put some super glue on it. Oops, wow. Got a little bit too much super glue squirted out. That's fine. Alright, again, I'm holding this on here tight. Do the same thing with this one. Now this one can come inside just a little bit. I just want to make sure that when my lever arm comes back here like this, it's going to line up and there's going to be enough room here for the string to wind around. And now I just need to make sure that there's enough room for my wheel to fit on here, and there is. So I'll go ahead and super glue this as well. Got one more washer. Throw that guy on there. And now the wheel. If you need to, you can twist these around. Now, if you wanted to, you can do a little bit of prep work on the wheels. Like, I've got a little bit of excess coming off here, but I can always sand that later. To me, I'm not worried about that right now. Wheels are spinning freely. Okay. Now, one of the last things that I need to do, I'm going to need to hook my lever arm up. So, I'm going to use my pliers to pinch this on nice and tight. So, make this go off to one side. Pinch it on. You don't want to mess with it too much because this soft aluminum will break, but that's good. Got a lever arm. I'm going to attach this lever arm here. You can slide right on there. Good. Okay. Everything's coming together. And that last, I'm going to take this. I'm going to turn this into a hook for the string to go around. Okay. Which I'm going to put right on this outside. I'm going to wrap it around 2 times. And then I'm going to twist it together. See right here. Start twisting it. But it's a lot easier if I take the pliers and get it nice and close. Tighten this little hook up. So I want to make it nice. Looking hook. Doesn't have to be very big. So then I'll take my snips, cut off the excess I don't need. Now you'll see I've got a good hook. I do not want this hook to get super glued to the straw either. So I want to make sure that when I put super glue on here, I don't super glue the straw. Otherwise, obviously, the axle won't spin around inside the straw. Put a little super glue on there. Okay. Alright, and I'll wipe off any excess. That'll just take a second to dry. While I'm doing that, I'm going to measure my string. My string says it needs to be 330 millimeters. I've got some string. The one thing I did do to prep is I put a loop on this already, but I need 33 millimeters worth of string. That's 33, but I'm going to need a little more because I'm going to give myself some extra string to be able to tie it. Alright, now basically all I need to do is have enough string to reach back here to this hook, and I'm going to tie it up here. My easy method is I'll just spin this around a couple of times to get it started, and then I can just tie it in a few knots. There it is. There it is. That should be long enough to reach and to let go. Looks good to me. Snip that guy off of there. Guess I need some new scissors. Alright. So, still got movement. Still got movement. While we're waiting for that super glue to dry, the last thing I can do is put these rubber bands, which I need on the back wheels here. Alright, and we'll line these up neatly. Take this one. Okay. I could have put the rubber bands on ahead of time and that would have been smarter, but I didn't, so no problem. Okay. Now you can take some time to kind of line those up better, but I have a Mousetrap car. And if this super glue is dry, it's not quite dry. It's going to take a second. So we'll pause that and then we'll come back and show you how it works. Building our car, and now we're going to race it. It'll be hard to see the string, but I have a little hook here. Maybe you can see it better here. So I'm going to hook I have a little loop. Let me open it up a little bit. Okay. There, I've got my loop on the end of the string. And I'm going to put it on this hook here on the back, and then we just need to wind it up. So I'm just running my wheels backwards like this, and you can kind of see the string is winding around the axle. And that's how we wind up our car. Okay, looks good. Alright, I'm going to come over here and start it, and let's see how far this guy goes.